Good afternoon. The Senate Committee on Natural Resources will now come to order. Welcome to those in Carson City online and by phone. Uh, Seeing that most of our members are present and we've reached quorum, for the record, our secretary, please mark Senator Brooks excused for right now. He's running a little bit late. So, members and presenters, please mute your microphone when you are not speaking, and now that we're in the committee room, please mute any cell phones or any other electronic devices. For all individuals present in our meeting room, please always keep your face covering on and maintain social distancing. And the legislative building has been closed to the public, but it is opening up gradually and with the necessary safety precautions. So it is a hybrid now between virtual and in-person participation. As in previous sessions, all committee-related information is available on the Nevada Electronic Legislative Information System, or NELIS, which is accessible from the legislature's website. There are multiple ways to engage with the committee. This includes registering to participate in a committee meeting through the system on NELIS or in selecting your preferred method for participation, submitting written testimony to the committee's email address, sharing your opinion via the legislature's opinion application on NELIS, and viewing committee meetings online through NELIS or on the legislature's YouTube channel. To testify on a bill or provide public comment during the 2021 legislative session, members of the public must first register for the meeting that you'd like to participate in, and detailed instructions for participation are available on the help page on every top page on NELIS. Similar to previous sessions, testimony and public comment may be limited due to time constraints, and when you are on the phone line, please pay attention to which bill is being considered. When in Broadcast and Production Services, BPS will call on you and tell you which keys to press to raise your hand and unmute yourself. If you need any assistance with any of these processes, or if you'd like to receive an electronic notification of the committee's agendas and minutes, always feel free to please contact our committee manager. Today, the committee will be hearing 4 assembly bills. We have AB 85, AB 97, AB 171, and AJR 4, and we'll also be holding a work session on AB 6, AB 52, and AB 72. We were planning to start with the work session, but seeing that we don't have all our members at this time, we're going to go ahead and switch for now to do Assembly Bill 85. So I'll go ahead and open the hearing on Assembly Bill 85. This measure revises provisions relating to noxious weeds. We have with us another special guest today, former Assemblywoman Heidi Swank, who is on Zoom to present AB 85. So please proceed, and welcome back, Dr. Swank.
Thank you, Chair Donate and the Senate Committee on Natural Resources. Always good to be here. I am here to present AB 85, which came out of the Committee on Wildfires during last interim. So as we all know, cheatgrass is a major issue in northern Nevada. Since its introduction in 1906, it has overtaken the sagebrush sea and now dominates roughly 20 million acres in the Great Basin. Now, the impacts of the spread of cheatgrass are several. First, it replaces sagebrush that sage grouse rely upon for, among other things, migration corridors. It also fuels wildfires, such as we saw in 2018 in the massive Martin Fire. And it has also undermined the sagebrush sea, a historic landscape in northern Nevada. However, there are ongoing efforts to hold it back. However, we know that in areas where cheatgrass is in a monoculture, those areas are probably not savable, but other areas could be. The Invasive Plant and Noxious Weeds program is run by the Nevada Department of Agriculture, and it sets lists of plants that are designated as noxious weeds. Noxious weeds are prioritized for action against their spread. So currently, cheatgrass could not be deemed a noxious weed because of a little bit of language that was put in the early 20th century in NRS 555.130. So the removal of this language would allow the state quarantine officer to deem cheatgrass or other long-established invasives like red brome as noxious weeds. It does not require that they do so, it just allows them to do so. In addition to that, we have also had a couple of amendments, one that came in the Assembly, working with Mr. Tibbetts, who I think he's here, that would allow this designation to be just in specific areas and not across the entire state. And then in the last few weeks, there's been a friendly amendment that has come from the Nevada Department of Transportation that would require the state quarantine officer, if they were going to take advantage of this designation, to consult with the governing bodies and administrative entities with the jurisdiction in these public rights of way. That's the entire gist of the bill. I am more than happy to answer any questions the committee may have, and thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Swank. Any questions from the committee members? Senator Goicoechea.
Excuse me. Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I guess I'm just a little bit nervous about, if at the point it is impractical to try and control it. I guess I'm a little nervous about designating it as a noxious weed, but I guess the language in there that you could actually take out some specific geographic areas and really focus on that might make it controllable. So I guess I can live with it, but I think as far as wholesale control of cheatgrass as a noxious weed, very expensive. Thank you.
If I may, Mr. Chair?
Please proceed.
Just to answer Senator Goicoechea's, so yes, definitely there are areas we know that are a cheatgrass monoculture that those are not controllable areas, but there are other areas that do not have that quite that amount, that spread of cheatgrass and other weeds in there. And so this would allow the state quarantine officer, if they decided that this was actually a feasible project, to designate them. But again, just in these specific areas and only in coordination with any agency that might be affected by that designation.
Follow up, if I may, Mr. Chair. And then, because this is established by regulation, would the quarantine officer in fact have to hold a hearing then before he designated an area?
Heidi Swank for the record. Thank you, Senator. I believe we do have someone from the Department of Agriculture who could answer that question for us, if you would like. I'm not sure of the exact regulation.
Good afternoon, Megan Brown for the record, and I think I will just defer to council. I'm not prepared to talk specifically about how the regulation would go with this particular change. Currently, to change the current list of noxious weeds, yes, it goes through that public process, but I'm not sure if this amendment how that would affect that, so I will defer to council.
Thank you, Ms. Brown.
Thank you, Senator Goicoechea. Any other questions before we proceed? And let the record reflect that Senator Brooks is not present. Okay, I don't see any other questions on this bill. So let's go ahead and proceed to testimony. So first, as a reminder, we'll be limiting all testifiers to 2 minutes each, and testifiers are encouraged to submit more, to summarize their positions and submit more comprehensive testimony in writing. Is there anyone in this room looking to testify in support on AB 85? Seeing none. BPS, is there anyone on the line wishing to provide support testimony for AB 85?
Thank you, Chair. To testify in support on Assembly Bill 85, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Chair, there are no callers in support at this time.
Thank you so much, BPS. Next, we'll go to testimony in opposition. Is there anyone in the room wishing to testify in opposition? Seeing none. BPS, is there anyone on the phone line wishing to testify in opposition to AB 85?
Thank you, Chair. To testify in opposition on Assembly Bill 85, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Chair, there are no callers in opposition at this time.
Thank you so much, BPS. And last but not least, is there anyone wishing in this room to testify in neutral on AB 85? Seeing none, BPS, is there anyone on the line wishing to provide testimony in neutral?
Thank you, Chair. To testify in neutral on Assembly Bill 85, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Caller with the last 3 digits, 436. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You have 2 minutes and may begin.
Thank you and good afternoon. This is Jake Tibbetts, JakeTibbitts. I'm the Eureka County Natural Resources Manager representing Eureka County. Eureka County is neutral on AB 85. Want to note we were initially opposed for some of the same reasons that you heard from Senator Gokichia before. We worked with Dr. Swank and the Assembly Natural Resource Committee to amend and clarify the bill to what's reflected in the first reprint. This has allowed us to move off of our previous opposition, and we want to go on record and thank Dr. Swank and Assemblyman Watts and his committee for helping us get to the bill to where it currently is and the clarity that it provides. Thank you.
Chair, there are no additional callers in neutral at this time.
Thank you so much, BPS. Dr. Swink, did you have any closing remarks?
I do not. Thank you all very much for your time.
Thank you so much, and it's always a pleasure to see you again. I'll go ahead and close the hearing on AB 85, and again, the committee will not be taking any action today, but I may bring it back for a future work session. Seeing that we have all our committee members at this time, I'll go ahead and pivot towards getting the work session in and out of the way. If you will give me one quick second. All right, so with this work session, I would like to remind everyone that we will not be taking testimony at the work session. However, I may call on someone as necessary to answer any questions from the committee members. Let's start with Assembly Bill 6, which revises provisions governing an application for a temporary change relating to appropriated water. Our policy analyst, Jennifer Rudy, will walk us through the work session. So Ms. Rudy, please proceed.
Thank you, Chair Doñate. This is Jennifer Rudy, Committee Policy Analyst. Assembly Bill 6 provides that a person may file a written protest against the granting of an application for a temporary change to the place of diversion, manner of use, or place of use of water already appropriated, and that the state engineer may hold a hearing in accordance with the procedures set forth in existing law. There are no amendments for consideration for this measure. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Rudy. And just to let the committee members know, we do have representatives from the Division of Water Resources if we have any questions. Does anyone have any questions? I don't see any, so I'll go ahead and entertain a motion to do pass AB 6. So moved. We have a motion from Vice Chair Scheibel and a second from Senator Brooks. Is there any discussion? Being none, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, please say nay. Motion carries. I will go ahead and assign this to Vice Chair Scheibel. Thank you. All right, Assembly Bill 52 is next, which makes various changes related to the Land Use Planning Advisory Council. Ms. Rudy, please proceed.
Thank you, Chair Doñate. This is Jennifer Rudy, Committee Policy Analyst. Assembly Bill 52 adds to the Land Use Planning Advisory Council 1 voting member appointed by the Nevada Indian Commission and 1 non-voting member appointed by the Nevada League of Cities and Municipalities or its successor organization. The bill also requires the Advisory Council to advise any federal or state agency or local government on land use planning and policy, assist and advise in the resolution of inconsistencies in land use plans if requested, and make recommendations related to areas of critical environmental concern. Finally, in addition to the other provisions, the bill changes the minimum period required in existing law for notice of certain public hearings of the Advisory Council by publication in newspapers from 20 days to 10 days before the hearing. The Division of State Lands of the State Department of Conservation and Natural Resources submitted the attached amendment to clarify that the additional voting member representing the Nevada Indian Commission is to be appointed by the governor, the same as the other 17 voting members. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Rudy. And we also have representatives from the Division of State Lands if we have any questions. So committee members, any questions? Seeing none, I'll go ahead and entertain a motion to amend and do pass as amended AB 52. We have a motion from Vice Chair Scheibel and a second from Senator Brooks. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. I'll go ahead and give this to Senator Hanson, if that's okay. Thank you, sir. Okay. And last but not least, we have Assembly Bill 72, which revises provisions relating to the State Board on Geographic Names. Ms. Rudy, please proceed.
Thank you, Chair Doniate. This is Jennifer Rudy, Committee Policy Analyst. Assembly Bill 72 adds a representative of the Nevada Indian Commission as a voting member of the Nevada State Board on Geographic Names. The bill also removes the state resident cartographer as the board's executive secretary and requires the voting members of the board to select the person to serve in this position. Lastly, the bill clarifies that the chair and vice chair are designated from among the voting members of the board and that the vice chair presides in the absence of the chair. There are no amendments for this measure. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Rudy. Committee members, do we have any questions? Senator Goycochea.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And we talked about this very briefly in the bill hearing, but I'm still not sure. Now, we've got 12 members, and you select an executive secretary who's a non-voting member, but is that person from the 12 or not?
Thank you, Senator Goycochea. Mr. Alan Amron, would you be able to answer that?
Thank you, Chair Donate. Alan Amber for the record. So looking at subsection 2 of section 1, that's on page 2 of that bill, we're saying that the voting members of the board shall select the executive secretary, and we're told in the previous sentence that the executive secretary is a non-voting member of the board. In order to have that provision read in conjunction with the subsection 1, where we're told that all of the voting members, well, that they're voting members, I would argue that then when they select the executive secretary, it has to be somebody who is not a member of the board, since the executive secretary, they can't vote, but a voting member has to vote, if that makes any sense.
Just so you're telling me that he is not one of the 12, I'm fine. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Senator Goycochea.
This is Cynthia.
Ms. Lafambras, did you want to say comment?
This is Cynthia Laframboise for the Nevada State Library Archives and Public Records. And it was always my understanding that the board selected the chair. Was that the question?
Ms. Lafambras, I think our committee counsel explain the answer that we were looking for, so I think we're good, or?
And no, if I may, Mr. Chair, I was looking for the executive secretary, which it wasn't really clear. I didn't know if that became one, if you selected from the 12, and that way it would make it an 11-member board. Otherwise, you've got a 12-member board subject to tie, those things. So it wasn't real clear. We talked about it in the committee hearing, but I think what the legal's opinion is that the 12 are voting members, and they would, in fact, select an executive secretary who is a non-voting member.
Ms. Lafambras, did you want to respond?
Well, I will have to concur with your legal advice.
All right. Thank you, ma'am.
The chair and vice chair are designated from the voting members, the vice chair. Okay.
All right.
So.
Thank you for your comment, ma'am. All right. Committee members, do we have any other questions? Seeing no questions, I'll go ahead and entertain a motion to do pass AB 72. We have a motion from Vice Chair Scheibel to do pass AB 72. Do I have a second? Second by Senator Brooks. Is there any discussion on the motion? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. I'll go ahead and give this to Senator Brooks if it's okay. Thank you, sir. All right, let's go ahead and go back in order. Let's start with we'll go ahead and start with Assembly Bill 97. So I'll go ahead and open a hearing on that bill. This measure revises provisions governing toxic chemicals. Today we have Assemblyman Watts. So whenever you are ready, please proceed.
Thank you very much, Chair Doniate, members of the committee. For the record, I'm Howard Watts, representing Assembly District 15 in Clark County, and I'm glad to present Assembly Bill 97 for your consideration today, which addresses certain toxic chemicals, particularly those that impact our firefighters. PFAS, short for per- and polyfluorinated alkyl substances, are chemicals that are used to make products grease-proof or waterproof, and they're found in a wide range of products from cookware, food packaging, apparel, carpets, and firefighting foams. Unfortunately, several of these compounds have been linked to serious health problems, including cancer, hormone disruption, and immune suppression. They are sometimes called forever chemicals because they do not easily break down in the environment. PFAS contamination has become a major issue nationwide, particularly near manufacturing facilities using the chemicals, as well as at airports and military bases where it's been used both in actual firefighting as well as in training and testing. Firefighters face high levels of potential exposure during training, firefighting, and the presence of these compounds in their turnout gear. Here in Nevada, 2013 to 2015 NDEP, Division of Environmental Protection, an EPA study of 98 sites within 18 public water systems in our state, including those serving the Las Vegas and Reno metropolitan areas, found levels below current health advisory levels, which is great news. We don't have any industrial sources of this pollution in our state, which is what's contaminated water substantially in other areas. The story is a bit different, however, at our military installations. Of 11 samples that were taken at Nellis Air Force Base, 8 were above the advisory level, which is 70 nanograms per liter, with the highest concentration at 42,000 nanograms per liter, which is 600 times above the level that's considered safe. At Creech, 4 of the 8 samples, or half, were above, with the highest concentration at 21,000 nanograms per liter. And at the Reno Air National Guard at the Reno Tahoe International Airport, all 11 of the samples taken were above safe levels, with the highest concentration coming in at 110,000 nanograms per liter, which is more than 1,500 times past the health advisory level. Thankfully, action is being taken in regards to these chemicals. Earlier this year, the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency announced that they are developing drinking water standards for the 2 most common PFAS chemicals, PFOS and PFOA. Additionally, the Division of Environmental Protection secured a grant to develop a PFAS action plan. They are actively working to monitor pollution across the state and address the contamination at our DoD sites. And they do have currently the authority to address contaminants of concern at high levels, even before those drinking water standards are set. So AB 97 really seeks to complement that federal action and build upon it. Sections 7 through 14.5 of the bill take additional action on these classes of chemicals. Section 12 specifically prevents the use of firefighting foam that contains these chemicals from being used in training in order to minimize firefighter exposure and limits their use in testing. Section 13 calls for any discharge of these firefighting foams to be reported to NDEP, ensuring that our environmental regulators have the information needed to keep our water systems and us safe. And Section 14.5 establishes a working group with diverse stakeholders to assist NDEP in the development of our state's PFAS action plan and make any appropriate recommendations for further action. AB 97 also deals with certain fire retardant chemicals called organohalogens. While these substances increase the time for ignition and combustion and provide a critical life-saving window when fires break out, they add to the toxins present in the smoke that firefighters and others are exposed to. And they could also leach out of some consumer products, putting our families at risk. Sections 16 through 26 of the bill ensure that children's products, upholstered furniture, textiles, and mattresses that are manufactured or sold in this state in the future are free from high concentrations of these chemicals. Cancer is the leading cause of death for our firefighters due to the toxic chemicals that they are exposed to on the job. AB 97 balances overall safety with reducing the hazards that our first responders and our community as a whole faces. At the same time, the bill looks to protect us from the potential impacts from exposure to these chemicals. I ask for your support, and with that, I'm glad to answer any questions that the committee may have.
Thank you so much, Assemblyman Watts. Committee members, do we have any questions? Vice Chair Scheibel.
Thank you so much, and I do appreciate the goals of the bill, and I think that it's important for public health. Obviously, we're not a money committee, but there is a hefty fiscal note on this bill. Has that been changed with the amendments made on the Assembly side? One of the reasons I'm asking is I noticed it also didn't go through Assembly Ways and Means.
Thank you very much for the question, Senator Scheibel. Through you, Mr. Chair, to the Senator, Howard Watts for the record. Yes, so the fiscal note that was submitted was based on the bill as originally written. In its first reprint, the bill no longer has any fiscal note. So that was removed. That's why the bill did not go to Ways and Means and is before you today.
Fantastic. If I could follow up, do you have, and you may have mentioned this in your presentation, I was busy trying to figure out how to spell polyfluoroalkyl. Do you have a sense for how common these firefighting agents are? Like, I'm just trying to get a sense for, are we talking every agency in the state has to change its standard operations? Are we talking about a couple of agencies, or every agency, but only in a couple of circumstances do they even use these?
Thank you for that question. Howard Watts for the record. Others can probably speak with more accuracy to that. What I can say is that these firefighting foams are meant for particularly fuel fires. So there are certain circumstances where these type of extinguishing materials are used versus others. For example, I don't think this foam is like what you would find in a typical fire extinguisher in a home. So yeah, I would say that it's substances that are used in specific facilities and are on hand to deal with specific types of fires that we'd be looking at addressing with the firefighting foam provisions of this bill. And also, I can just to reinforce another point, again, looking at our drinking water systems, even though these components are found not just in firefighting foams, but in other materials, including cookware, food packaging, the concentrations when water has been sampled in our community has been well below any of the action levels. Where we've seen the higher concentrations has been on our DoD, our military installations.
Thank you so much, Assemblyman Watts. Any questions from the committee members? I don't think I see any more, so let's go ahead and proceed to testimony at this time. So again, as a reminder, we will be limiting all testifiers to 2 minutes each, and anyone that's in this room, please make sure to identify yourself for the record before you come in. So let's go first. Is there anyone in this room willing to testify in support on AB 97 at this time?
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. For the record, my name is Christy Cabrera, Christi Cabrera, and I'm the Policy and Advocacy Director for the Nevada Conservation League here in support of AB 97. PFAS are toxic chemicals that can contaminate water, harm the environment, and are linked to numerous health impacts, even in very low quantities. PFAS do not break down in the natural environment and can find their way into our soil and our drinking water. They can also accumulate and remain in the environment, wildlife, and our bodies for extended periods of time. Because of this, they're commonly referred to as forever chemicals. Studies have shown that exposure to these chemicals can cause adverse health effects, including increased risk of cancer, suppressed immune systems, increased cholesterol, and problems in fetal development. This bill is a step in the right direction to keep Nevadans and our environment safe from these toxic chemicals. We would like to thank Assemblyman Watts for bringing this bill forward, and we urge the committee's support. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much, Ms. Cabrera. Anyone else in the room? Seeing none, let's go to the phone lines. BPS, is there anyone wishing to testify in support for AB 97?
Thank you, Chair. To testify in support on Assembly Bill 97, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Caller with the last three digits, 656, please press star 6 to unmute. Thank you, caller. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You have 2 minutes and may begin.
Good afternoon. Will Predman, representing Battleborn Progress, WILL, as in Peter, REGMAN. I will simply ditto the comments of Christy Cabrera and say we should be doing everything to keep our environment and drinking water safe for Nevadans. And thank you, Assemblyman Watts, for bringing this bill. We urge your support.
If you have joined the call and would like to testify in support on Assembly Bill 97, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Chair, there are no additional callers in support at this time.
Thank you so much, BPS. Next, we'll go to testimony in opposition. Is there anyone in the room? Seeing none, BPS, is there anyone on the phone lines wishing to testify in opposition to this bill?
Thank you, Chair. To testify in opposition on Assembly Bill 97, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Chair, there are no callers in opposition at this time.
Thank you so much, BPS. Last but not least, is there anyone in the room willing to testify in neutral on AB 97?
Good afternoon, Chairman Doñate, members of the committee. Edith Duarte, EDITH, DUARTE, Strategies 360, today representing Western State Petroleum Association. We are in neutral. We really want to thank the sponsor for working with us and other interested stakeholders to get us to a point where we are okay with this legislation as amended. In the petroleum industry, petroleum fires need to be extinguished quickly, efficiently, and PFAS firefighting foam does have is what works for us, and there really isn't anything else out there currently that is as efficient. So, thank you.
Thank you so much. Is there anyone else? Seeing none, let's go ahead and to the phone line. So BPS, is there anyone else wishing to testify in neutral on AB 97?
Thank you, Chair. To testify in neutral on Assembly Bill 97, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Caller with the last three digits, 266, please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You have 2 minutes and may begin.
Good afternoon, Chair Donate, members of the committee. My name is Jennifer Carr, JENNIFER CARR. I'm a Deputy Administrator for the Nevada Division of Environmental Protection. I'm testifying as neutral today on AB 97. NDP supports efforts to protect Nevada's water resources from PFAS contamination, and I want to thank Assemblyman Watts for considering input from NDP as the bill progressed through the Assembly. I will confirm that amendments made to the bill permitted us to remove our original fiscal note, as we believe AB 97 in its first reprint form can be implemented with existing NDP resources. PFAS workgroup activities envisioned by the bill are already in planning stages at NDP using some federal grant funds received in 2020. PFAS substances have been in widespread use since the 1950s. However, as mentioned, statewide testing required by the U.S. EPA under the Federal Safe Drinking Water Act, which was conducted in 2013 to 2015, did not detect PFAS in Nevada drinking water supplies, unlike other states that have had more severe PFAS impacts to public drinking water. NDP recognizes that results from the initial statewide testing are limited in that they are a snapshot in time and only tested for 7 of nearly 30 PFAS substances for which commercial lab capability now exists. Results are also limited by the requirement for targeted testing of Nevada public water systems serving populations over 10,000 people, with 4 smaller additional systems that were randomly selected. It is worth noting that additional testing under this federal program is planned for 2023 to 2025, and that 29 PFAS compounds or more will be tested at that time. Although PFAS have not been detected in Nevada's public water systems, NDEP will continue to pursue federal funding as it becomes available to assess the potential threat to our water resources while we develop communication and contingency plans to be used in the event of an occurrence. As noted by Assemblyman Watts, in the event of PFAS that is identified in a drinking water supply, NDEP has existing authority under Nevada Water Pollution Control and Public Water Systems Law and NRS 445A to address occurrences of PFAS. NDEP has past experience in addressing contaminants that do not have federal or state enforceable primary drinking water standards, and historic examples include releases of perchlorate at the former Pepcon and Kerr-McGee or Tronox facilities near Henderson, as well as releases of fuel oxygenates such as MTBE from gas stations and sulfates from mine sites. We would use these same authorities to respond to any instances of PFAS contamination. NDEP staff currently participate in an interstate PFAS group coordinated by the U.S. EPA Office of Research and Development's liaison to the Pacific Southwest region. And NDEP plans to assign professional staff from both our source water protection program within the Bureau of Safe Drinking Water and environmental cleanup programs within our Bureau of Corrective Actions to coordinate the Nevada work group now required in the bill. NDEP anticipates that PFAS work group activities outlined in Section 14.5 of the bill, including development of recommendations as required by subsection 2E, could be completed by the summer of 2022. That concludes my testimony, and I'm available to answer any questions from the committee.
Committee members, any questions? Good. BPS, is there anyone else?
Caller with the last 3 digits, 713. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You have 2 minutes and may begin.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. For the record, Tim Shestek with the American Chemistry Council, TIMSHESTEK. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today on AB 97, legislation that touches on several different chemistries that are used by a variety of different industry sectors and in a multitude of product applications. I'd like to thank Assemblyman Watts for working with us and other stakeholders to address some identified issues when the bill was first introduced. However, given the amendments adopted in the Assembly, we are currently neutral on AB 97. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today.
Caller with the last 3 digits, 396. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You have 2 minutes and may begin.
Good afternoon, Chairman Donyate and members of the Senate Committee on Natural Resources. My name is Jake Ward Herzik, JakeWard -HERZ as in zebra, IK. I'm a student at the William S. Boyd School of Law and the legislative extern for the Nevada Mining Association. As in the Assembly, the Nevada Mining Association is here today in neutral based on the amendments to the original language of the bill. We'd once again like to thank the bill's sponsor, Assemblyman Watts, for his diligence in working with us and other stakeholders on the amendment to ensure the Nevada mining industry may continue to work toward alternative firefighting solutions at mine operations across the state. Thank you.
We are currently in neutral testimony on Assembly Bill 97. If you have joined the call and would like to testify in neutral, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Chair, there are no additional callers in neutral at this time.
Thank you so much, VPS. Chairman Watts, do you have any closing remarks?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. Howard Watts for the record. I don't really have much to add in closing. I thank you for your time and consideration, and again, ask for your support of AB 97.
Thank you, sir. I'll go ahead and close the hearing on AB 97, and again, the committee will not be taking any action today, but it may bring it back for a future work session. Let's proceed to Assembly Bill 171. I'll go ahead and open the hearing on this bill, which establishes certain protections for certain swamp cedars. So, welcome back, Assemblyman Watts. Please proceed, and also we'll go to your guidance on how you'd like the order of your presenters. So.
Thank you very much again, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. Howard Watts for the record, representing Assembly District 15 in Clark County. I'm glad to present for you AB 171 today. This was a measure that I brought forward to the Public Lands Committee in the legislative interim in conversation and consultation with friends and colleagues in Eastern Nevada, particularly members of indigenous communities and tribal governments in the area. And I'd be remiss before moving forward without recognizing, as I have done on some of the other measures, that we are all gathered here today on the ancestral and occupied territory of the Washoe people, who have served as stewards of this land for generations. AB 171, as well as the other measure that we're going to consider, look to provide protections for a very special, ecologically unique and culturally significant grove of trees known as the swamp cedars in Spring Valley in White Pine County. As to how things are going to proceed, just to give you a quick overview, I'm going to turn it over to the folks who have the connection to the land to explain why it's so important. Then I can walk you through the text of the measure and we can answer questions. And then since the overall topic is very similar for the next bill, we can essentially, once we get to that point, go back into questions. So I just want to make all the members aware that some of this additional testimony that you're about to hear from my co-presenters, we're not going to repeat it, but much of what you hear for this bill applies to the resolution as well. And honestly, with that, I will walk you through the bill, but I'll stop at this point so that we can hear from Ms. Spilsbury, Mr. Sanford, and others about why the swamp cedars in Basawabi is important and in need of additional protection. And I don't know, Ms. Spilsbury, if you want to go first.
Okay. Thank you, Chairman Watts and members of the committee. I am Delane Stark Spilsbury, a small business owner, former Nevada Test Site employee, and a Western Shoshone woman whose family has lived in the Great Basin for time immemorial. Today, I come before you to ask for your support in our efforts to protect the swamp cedars. I'm enrolled with the Ely Shoshone tribe and currently live near McGill. I am a former territory chair of the Nevada Commission on Tourism and currently serve on the boards of the Great Basin National Heritage Area and the Great Basin Water Network. I am here on behalf of Nevada's indigenous communities. For many years, the Confederated Tribes of the Goshute, the Ely Shoshone, and the Duckwater Shoshone reservations have been working to tell an important story about our heritage. My contribution to those efforts follows. I am here today to encourage protection of what's sacred to my family and my tribe, the Spring Valley stand of Rocky Mountain juniper trees, known locally as the swamp cedars. Spiritually and culturally, the swamp cedars grow within an area referred to by my people as Basawabi, which means the sacred water valley in our Nua language. Basawabi was an important meeting place for Manua, who are the present-day Western Shoshone and Goshute people. Before colonization, indigenous people from across the Great Basin traveled far and wide to congregate in Spring Valley. It was a place for prayer, celebration, medicine, and rejuvenation, and that remains so today. The spiritual and cultural past of the swamp cedars represent what it means to be native and what needs to be Nua. However, the swamp cedars also tell a damning story about the history of Nevada. and an ethnic cleansing of my people. Spring Valley was home to at least 3 major massacres of Native people between 1850 and 1900. 2 were military-led engagements. The third was conducted by a band of vigilantes. My own grandmother was one of 2 children who survived the last massacre. As she hid in a ditch, she witnessed bloodthirsty thugs viciously kill off her relatives and friends and desecrate her place of worship, her place of solace. For the remaining Nua people, it is our firmest belief that the swamp cedars in Spring Valley embody the spirits of the lives lost during these massacres. The bodies of our relatives nourished those junipers. Their spirits, souls, and remains are all that is left in Spring Valley in those trees. That is why I continue to visit. That is where I go to visit my relatives. Significance of Bosawabi to my people is hard to describe. We've heard Bosawabi be compared to places like Mecca or Vatican City. Another comparison would be to a massacre site like Wounded Knee and countless other sites where Native people were unjustly attacked. But I want to say that you cannot compare Bosawabi to anything else. There's only one. And if swamp cedars are gone from Bosawabi, then it is all gone. Bosawabi is listed on the National Register of Historic Places as a traditional cultural property. The site is also listed as an area of critical environmental concern with the Bureau of Land Management. Bosawabi is also within the boundaries of the recently redesignated Great Basin National Heritage Area. Most of this as a result of our work. While those designations sound like proper safeguards, we have learned over many years that those terms only offer normal protections. We need policies at all levels, policies with more teeth. Currently, there are no protections in Nevada for sacred trees like swamp cedars. We are long overdue for a change. Proposals to protect the swamp cedars are opportunities to listen, learn, and respect our wishes. We hope this can be an opportunity to build bridges between our tribal governments and the state. Though the swamp cedars may not be officially considered a unique genetic population of Rocky Mountain junipers, they sure are unique to me. Bosawabi's trees bring my people's feelings of both comfort and sadness. On top of a mountain, Rocky Mountain juniper is just a Rocky Mountain juniper. On the valley floor at Bosawabi, a swamp cedar is my connection to my ancestors, my heritage, my people, my existence. My son Rick often says, if Bosawabi and the swamp cedars are harmed, it will be my own personal extinction event. Bosawabi represents what it means to be me, what it means to be Native, what it means to be Nua. That is why I encourage you now to protect the spirits of our Nua ancestors, our culture, and our history of our Nua people. Please support the effort to protect the swamp cedars. And thank you so very much. And thank you again, Chairman Watts.
Thank you, Ms. Spilsbury. And if it's all right with the chair, I believe we have Mr. Sanford also providing some remarks.
Mr. Watts, this is Dr. Monty Sanford for the record. If it would be all right with the committee, I'd like to pass my turn on to Rupert, and maybe I could go after Chairman Rupert Steele from the Confederated Tribes of the Goshute Reservation.
Yes, of course. So yeah, Mr. Chair, if it's all right, then we'll have Chairman Steele go.
Hello, no Rupert Steele, no everybody Gimbana, no Goshute. Good afternoon. My name is Rupert Steele. That's RUPERT STEELE I'm the chairman of the Confederate Tribes of the Goshu Reservation. And I'm here to speak on AB 171, urging you to strongly consider approving the legislation. So, because yesterday was a very proud day for Indigenous people. It was the Missing and Murdered Indigenous Peoples Awareness Day. And my ancestors that were massacred at that site in Swamp Cedar, they're still there. And yesterday I prayed for them. Prayed for each and every one of us too. Because, you know, it does hurt spiritually. As we all know when we lose our loved one. And the ones that are give up their lives in order for me to survive, to be living here happily, like they did, it gives me great pride and joy. And it's very inspiring what they had done for me. So I often thank them every day. And I go down there and pray with them. And I use the same herbs that they used in their ceremonies at that time, we still use today. It gives me a good feeling when I'm done with them. And when I come home and leave them and tell them that I'll be back some other day, come visit again. It's kind of sad, but, you know, I feel good when I go back the next time. So it is a very sacred place for us. And it's a place where we worship, where we cry, gather, tell stories. And when I go down there, the last time I was down there last month, you know, I always talk to them, talk to the trees, tell them how proud I am of them, and be there, stand strong, because they are an inspiration to my people, to me, and my young people that are coming behind me, because they stand there strong, regardless of whether it's cold, rain. You know, they inspire us to be strong like them. They have their own spirits. And I go down there and pray with them. And to see my people disappear, be massacred without their names or not knowing who they are. But I do remember them in my prayers and ask them for guidance, because they do know where we have been, and they do know where we're going to go. So it gives me a strong feeling of who I am when I go visit the Swamp Cedars. Pasawiba, we call it. And with all the area that's around Spring Valley, very sacred to us. It holds everything that a person could need to survive. It's a major gathering place for my people. But unfortunately, some were massacred. They were gone. They gave up their life for me, so I could walk this Mother Earth and identify myself as one of them and thank them. So the Swamp Cedars is vital for our survival of our religion and culture. So I come before you to ask you to support AB 171. Thank you.
And if it's all right with you, Mr. Chair, now I'll have Mr. Sanford share a few words.
Thank you, Chairman Watts and members of the Senate committee. Mr. Watts, I hope I didn't move us too much out of a planned organization on that, but I felt like having Rupert Steele go in front of me is proper to do. I'm going to keep my testimony short, but I do want to kind of zoom out a little bit and bring up something that both Rupert and Delane touched on, and that is the Native American Holocaust, and yesterday being recognized as Missing and Murdered Indigenous Peoples Day. We tend to think, I think a lot of us probably go through school in the United States, or if we've immigrated here, we probably don't know anything about the Native American Holocaust. We don't know, we're not taught what that was like for Indigenous people. The centuries upon centuries upon centuries of Indigenous people suffering through one massacre after the other massacre after the other. And, I just want to bring that into focus here, partially because of the Indigenous Peoples Day yesterday, but also the massacres at Basawabi, those were part of the Native American genocide, the Native American Holocaust. We tend not to think of it that way, but it is. And one of the things about Basawabi, as Rupert Steele and Delane Spilsbury mentioned, is that Basawabi was and still is a religious gathering area. It's a ceremonial area. And because it was that, because Indigenous people gathered there from all over the place, people came from distant regions to gather there. But because it was a ceremonial gathering area, people were targeted at Basawabi because it's where a lot of people could be, as what they called, flock shoot. So, in other words, Indigenous people could be killed off in mass. Basawabi was one of those places where they did that in the Great Basin. And it's special meaning and significance because of that. And I just want to recognize that and recognize all the people that have lost their lives, both at Basawabi, but also all of the other missing, murdered, and forgotten Indigenous people. I have a few other things I'd like to say about swamp cedars. There's sort of more technical issues, but I sort of feel like at this point, I'm just going to kind of truncate it and keep it short. But we've heard some opposition to this bill in the past in previous assembly committees, and I would just say that, already the state of Nevada protects certain plant species, including what they call Christmas trees, yuccas, and cacti. And I feel like, we're in a pretty special circumstance here to be able to protect the swamp cedar trees within Spring Valley, specifically within the traditional cultural property, which is a very specific area. And so I just want to put forth that, this is a special circumstance and it's a special tree to the Indigenous people, and it holds special memory for the people. And with that, I'll take any questions if the committee has them. Thank you.
Thank you. And so it's all right, Mr. Chair, I'll walk you very briefly through the bill and just provide a couple of additional pieces of context, and then I'm happy to take any questions that members of the committee may have. The bill itself is quite short. Section 1 is really the main content of the bill, and so it adds to Chapter 527 of NRS a declaration about the importance of protecting the Rocky Mountain junipers known as swamp cedars, and it creates a specific geographic boundary for these trees, those that are located in White Pine County within the boundaries of that Basawabi traditional cultural property. And then it makes it unlawful for any entity to willfully or negligently cut, destroy, mutilate, or remove any of the trees within that area without first obtaining a special permit from the state forester or fire warden and complying with any other applicable requirements. And this type of protection is something that we see in other portions of this chapter of NRS. As was mentioned, there are some protections related to the way that pine nuts are harvested from those trees. There are protections for the harvesting of Christmas trees, cacti, and yucca. And in particular, there's an entire section allowing our state through a regulatory process to add specific plant species to a fully protected list due to their rarity and ecological value, at which point similar protections to these apply. So what we're doing is applying that same level of state protection to this grove of trees based on its cultural significance. Really, the rest of the bill just makes some conforming changes in that regard. There has been a lot of debate about this. There are questions about whether these trees, which again are commonly seen on mountainsides, are not commonly seen in valleys. And so this is the only known grove of these trees that occurs entirely in the valley bottom. And the reason for that is because the water table is shallow and available for these trees to access in a way that normally they wouldn't have the resources needed to survive and thrive. And so studies have not been done to determine if over time these trees are actually genetically different from the Rocky Mountain junipers that are found throughout the rest of the state and throughout the rest of the region. So they may be a distinct population, they may not be. And so what we're doing here is geographically defining the protections so that they do not apply to all Rocky Mountain junipers across the state. In addition, I think there's been a lot of discussion about the roles of the state and federal government in this. So these trees are located on federally managed public lands, and so there's certain actions for kind of overall land management status that have to be taken by the federal government. As you know, there are certain resources, water, wildlife, and to a certain extent flora in this state that are held in public trust and managed more directly by the state. And so having already asserted the state authority to manage some of these other plant populations for reasons of importance to the state, we're simply extending that to protect this grove of trees for their cultural significance, I think, to everyone in this state, and the spiritual significance they have to the indigenous residents of the area. So with that, that concludes the presentation. I'm glad to answer any questions that the committee may have.
Thank you so much, Assemblyman Watts. Committee members, any questions? Let's go with Senator Hansen.
Thank you. Actually, I support both the bills, just so you know. But there are some problems with some of the things that have been said that kind of concern me. One, Mr. Sanford mentioned that, in America, we don't know anything about the past, but I actually am familiar with the Sand Creek Massacre, Cherokee Trail of Tears, the Seminole Massacres, Wounded Knee. I'm not somebody that doesn't understand a lot about that. Admittedly, I'm not a Native American in the way it's defined now. However, the historical stuff around the sites, there's no question that there was a massacre in 1863. However, the 1859 one is highly questionable because of a whole bunch of anomalies in the story. The 1897 one actually is even more questionable because the original accounts indicate that they were cavalry, when there was in fact no cavalry in 1897 in that part of Nevada. So, some of the stuff that's said, no offense to anybody, but the historical inaccuracies disturb me as part of the bill. The water table argument, there's high water tables all over the place throughout the Rocky Mountains, not just there. And so the idea that this particular type of Rocky Mountain juniper only is surviving because of a high water table doesn't make sense either. So I support it. I support the indigenous people's concerns. I think it is a historically important site and should be set aside. And last, I would point out, you pointed out that this is the former area of the Washoe Indians. And the reason it's the former area of the Washoe Indians, because the Washoe Indians were driven here by the Paiute Indians. And they actually lived in the Sierras all along this side of the Sierras all the way up to Honey Lake Valley in fear of their more powerful Paiute neighbors. And the Paiutes and the Shoshones historically had all sorts of fights going on. And if you study all of the Indian history throughout the West, you find there's constant conflict between the various Indian tribes, starting with the 5 so-called civilized tribes back east who drove out the people that became the indigenous Sioux and the Midwest. I mean, there's just this constant conflict. So there's the idea that this is somehow some new, unique thing, just doesn't add up. So while I respect everyone's opinion on this, I think the historical anomalies in some of these things just make it highly questionable. I support the bill. I support setting aside this area. I support the true histories of some of these terrible massacres that did in fact occur. But I don't support the idea that this is somehow entirely unique to European civilization and that it didn't occur prior to us even being here. So with that, thank you, Mr. Chair, for allowing me to get that on the record.
Thank you for your comments, Senator Hansen. Howard Watts for the record. First of all, I appreciate your efforts. I know that you're very well read and very well educated on many of these issues, more than most, and so I appreciate that. Of course, I think the entire history of this continent is very complicated and in a variety of ways. And I appreciate you expressing those things, and I don't want this to turn into right now a debate on all the finer points of that, particularly since some of those things, while they are included in some of the language of the other measure that we'll discuss, are not actually referenced within this bill. Now, I just will say that we've seen that as long as there's been human histories and people telling stories, there's been different versions of those stories, and that those stories bear particular importance to certain groups of people, and then there's sometimes disagreements on those interpretations from other people. So again, I appreciate your support for the overall initiative, as well as you putting those comments on the record. And again, we may have some disagreements, and we can take those offline as well.
Thank you. I appreciate that, and I do support the bills. I want to make that clear. I just want to keep the historical record a little more within some perspective, and you just brought that to our attention again. So thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Any other questions? Good? All right. Let's go ahead and proceed to testimony. As a reminder, I'll be limiting testifiers to 2 minutes each, and testifiers are encouraged to summarize their positions and submit more comprehensive testimony in writing. For anyone who is watching, as a reminder, please try not to conflate your comments. I know we have 2 measures that are very similar to each other, but just make sure you're listening to the prompts by BPS. So, is there anyone in this room willing to testify in support on AB 171?
Thank you again, Chair Donate and members of the committee. For the record, my name is Christy Cabrera, Christi Cabrera, and I'm the Policy and Advocacy Director for the Nevada Conservation League here in support of AB 171. As was stated in the bill presentation, swamp cedars are sacred to our indigenous populations and are ecologically unique. These trees are also threatened by climate change, drought, and overpumping of groundwater. We firmly believe that these trees deserve protection under the law, and we urge the committee's support. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Anyone else wishing to provide support testimony? Seeing none, BPS, let's go to the phone lines. Is there anyone on the phone wishing to provide support testimony for AB 171?
Thank you, Chair. To testify in support on Assembly Bill 171, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Caller with the last 3 digits, 393, please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You have 2 minutes and may begin.
Good afternoon, Chair and members of the committee. For the record, my name is Ian Bigley. That's IANBIGLEY, and I'm the Mining Justice Organizer with the Progressive Leadership Alliance of Nevada, here in support of Assembly Bill 171. So you've just heard testimony from tribal leaders and elders imploring you to take action. We want to thank those folks for sharing such important stories and providing an opportunity for non-Native people to gain perspective and understanding. We hope that this effort can be an opportunity to build bridges rather than divide. The legislature has an unprecedented opportunity to recognize the cultural and spiritual significance of the swamp cedars and respect the practices that continue to occur there. The swamp cedars are a place of prayer, and these prayers are a part of the necessary healing process for these communities going through ongoing historic trauma. Although the history of U.S. involvement in the swamp cedars is one of horrendous massacres of indigenous peoples, we have the opportunity to start a new story, one where we invest in protecting and enhancing the land and people within Nevada. We hope that members of the Nevada Legislature can see the deep importance of protecting the swamp cedars as a small but important step towards healing the land and people. Environmental justice requires us to step outside of past frameworks in order to include those who have historically not been recognized. This legislation does that in a very important way. Please support AB 171. Thank you.
Caller with the last 3 digits, 728. Please clearly state and spell your name for the record. You have 2 minutes and may begin.
Good afternoon, Chair Doniate and members of the committee. For the record, this is Marla McDade Williams, MARLA-MC, capital DADE, WILLIAMS, with Strategies 360 and representing the Reno Sparks Indian Colony. I want to extend our respect to Ms. Spilsbury and Mr. Steele for their comments and for carrying the Native history to this body. We also want to thank Assemblyman Watts and the members of the Legislative Committee on Public Lands for bringing this bill. The Reno Sparks Indian Colony has members who are Paiute, Shoshone, and Washoe, and their ancestors have been affected by issues like this throughout the history of this state and this country. That said, historical cultural areas of Nevada are important to all of us, and we urge your support for AB 171. Thank you.
Caller with the last 3 digits, 662. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You have 2 minutes and may begin.
My name is Kyle Roerink, KYLEROERINK. I'm the executive director of the Great Basin Water Network, and without getting into a tete-a-tete or anything, I did just want to affirm that the swamp cedar populations in Spring Valley are globally unique. There's academic research substantiating that, and I think the thing that really differentiates is the saline nature of the water table. And I'll be passing that academic work around to the committee just to ensure everyone knows that part of it. But I think this is about something much bigger, and I think everybody recognizes that. And but again, we are not here to say that this is a genetically distinct species. That research is yet to be conducted. However, we are saying that the Spring Valley stands are distinguished, and they're marked by, a beautiful and terrible history. And we are saying that threats exist. We are saying that these trees are worthy of fully protected status under NRS 527.270. Development and other human-caused actions could all imperil these trees. The state must do everything in its power to ensure the swamp cedars remain vibrant in Spring Valley. As we heard from Chairman Steele and Delane and Dr. Stanford, the history at Spring Valley goes back many thousands of years. AB 171 recognizes what took place before and after Western expansion. It appreciates the spiritual beliefs of Native people. It acknowledges that we are in a world where our natural resources are at risk. As Delane said in her testimony, when she sees a Rocky Mountain juniper on top of a mountain, she sees a tree. When she sees a swamp cedar in Spring Valley, she sees her relatives. I want to thank Chairman Doñate and Chairman Watts for their consideration of these bills and all members of the committee. Please support AB 171. Thank you.
Caller with the last three digits, 120. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You have 2 minutes and may begin.
Lisa Ortega, Lisaortega. Chairman Donate, Chairman Watts, members of the committee, my name is Lisa Ortega, a volunteer member of the Sierra Club's Legislative Committee, Southern Nevada ExCom member, and a master arborist. On behalf of the Sierra Club and our more than 40,000 members and supporters statewide, I'm speaking in support of 171. The testimony that we have heard exemplifies the stands of trees with important historical, cultural, spiritual, and ecological significance deserve the type of protections offered by 171. The Division of Forestry, through the State Forest or Fire Warden, have and should have the ability to protect forest species of significance. Right now, there are no protections in state law for these unique swamp cedars, Juniperus scopulorum. These pockets of trees are not known to exist at the current elevation they stand upon anywhere else, and they deserve their own significant place in our nation's flora history and that of the indigenous peoples of Nevada. These are not to be confused with the more common Utah juniper, Juniperus osseosperma. We believe that this legislation offers an opportunity for non-Native communities to learn more about the customs and traditions of indigenous peoples in the Great Basin. This is a historic opportunity to build trust, to gain new understandings of each other and our history in Nevada, while offering protections that preserve places of such historical significance. AB 171 will ensure that important protections outlined in NRS 527.050 apply to swamp cedars. This effort is about looking outside of existing frameworks and including new perspectives and ideas into the conservation conversations. We want to thank our tribal leaders for the conviction and commitment to sharing their history through their stories. Their effort to protect this place is inspiring to a new generation of conservation leaders and marks a new inclusive future for Nevada. It's time to protect the Nevada swamp cedars. Thank you.
Caller with the last three digits, 594. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You have 2 minutes and may begin.
My name is Shania Marks, SHANIAMARQUES, and I'm with the Lee Shoshone tribe, a cultural representative. The swamp cedars are an important part of our culture and our past. These trees are unique not only biologically, but historically, and the protection of these trees is essential. The possible destruction without the protection would essentially be destroying our connection to the past, and there needs to be consequences if something like that occurs. So I do urge the support of AB 171.
Caller with the last three digits, 377. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You have 2 minutes and may begin. Caller with the last three digits, 377. You are unmuted and you may proceed with your testimony.
My name is Jana Moan, JAINAMOAN, and I'm the External Affairs Director for the Nature Conservancy in Nevada. Chair Doñate and members of the committee, we are here to testify in support of AB 171. The Conservancy recognizes the spiritual and cultural importance of the swamp cedars, and we support additional protections for these trees in Spring Valley. With AB 171, we have the chance to protect the traditional knowledge that has been shared with us today. Basuwabi is a deeply important cultural landscape. The singular qualities of this place are rooted in a deep relationship that our own human species has developed with this population of trees over countless generations since time immemorial. Recognizing the swamp cedars as protected flora, as AB 171 would do, will provide a layer of protection for this culturally significant population of trees. Thank you to the tribal leaders for sharing their history and culture. We urge the members of this committee to vote yes on AB 171. Thank you for hearing our testimony.
Caller with the last three digits, 656. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You have 2 minutes and may begin.
Hi, committee. Again, for the record, Will Pregman with Battleborn Progress, WILLPREGMAN. I will simply say ditto to the previous speakers. This legislature should be protecting invaluable species like this, preserve land sacred to Indigenous peoples in our state. We thank Assemblyman Watts for bringing this forward and encourage your support. Thank you.
We are currently in support testimony on Assembly Bill 171. If you have joined the call and would like to testify in support, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Chair, there are no more callers in support at this time.
Thank you so much, BPS. Let's keep on going. Next, we will hear testimony in opposition. Is there anyone in the room? Seeing none, BPS, is there anyone online or on the phone lines that would like to provide testimony in opposition to AB 171?
Thank you, Chair. To testify in opposition on Assembly Bill 171, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Chair, there are no callers in opposition at this time.
Thank you so much, BPS. And finally, let's go to anyone wishing to testify in neutral on AB 171. Is there anyone in the room? Seeing none, let's go ahead to the phone lines. Is there anyone wishing to testify in neutral on AB 71?
Thank you, Chair. To testify in neutral on Assembly Bill 171, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Caller with the last three digits, 620. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You have 2 minutes and may begin.
Thank you. My name is Bradley Kroll. I'm the director of the Nevada Department of Conservation and Natural Resources. I will endeavor to keep my remarks to 2 minutes or less. Good afternoon, Chair Donate and members of the committee. Again, my name is Brad Kroll. As I mentioned, I am the director of the Department of Conservation and Natural Resources for Nevada. The department is testifying in neutral today on AB 171. I'd like to start by thanking the committee for the attention it has paid to the concerns expressed by the department and its respective divisions of forestry, natural heritage, and historic preservation. We appreciated the opportunity to provide comment at the Interim Legislative Committee on Public Lands hearing on September 10th, 2020, and to submit a collective letter on January 11th, 2021, regarding various opportunities to protect the swamp cedars. I'd ask that that letter be included in the record of today's hearing. For the purposes of today, we recognize and commend the ways in which this proposal has evolved in response to our comments. The department understands and supports the spirit and intent of this bill. The swamp cedars are undoubtedly an important cultural resource. It is also commonly recognized that the swamp cedars are located in unusual habitat, isolated from other populations of Rocky Mountain juniper. The department is concerned, however, with the precedent. We appear to be standing at the top of a long, slippery slope. There are innumerable important natural resources across this vast state, many of which are located on federal lands. These unique resources cannot all be individually recognized in state statute, each requiring a special permit issued by the state forest or fire warden. The burden would simply be too great. The population of swamp cedars and associated sacred and culturally significant area is on federal land managed by the Bureau of Land Management. It appears, therefore, that the protection of the swamp cedar population in Spring Valley should be primarily addressed by the BLM, the land manager for this cultural resource area, in consultation with tribal leaders. One opportunity for the BLM to protect the swamp cedars would be to revise and expand its existing area of critical environmental concern to include the entire Spring Valley swamp cedar population and culturally significant area. Another opportunity would be through the request set forth in Assembly Joint Resolution 4, which we will discuss separately. I'd also like to highlight an additional area of concern impacting the swamp cedars
that has not yet been fully raised during consideration of AB 171 or AJR 4, and which is not totally within the federal domain. To truly provide lasting protection for this important natural and cultural resource, it's important to look beyond just the terrestrial elements related to the swamp cedars. Ensuring adequate water resources for the survival of this species, ensuring adequate water resources for the survival of this special stand of cedars is also critically important. With that in mind, I would encourage this committee, tribal representatives, and other stakeholders to work with water right holders in the Spring Valley area to explore opportunities for protecting the water resources associated with the swamp cedars, namely the Southern Nevada Water Authority and the LDS Church, which currently hold the majority of water rights for the water resources located in Spring Valley, adjacent to the location of the swamp cedars. With that, I appreciate your time and would be happy to answer any additional questions.
We are currently in neutral testimony on Assembly Bill 171. If you have joined the call and would like to testify in neutral, please press *9 now to take your place in the queue. Chair, there are no additional callers in neutral at this time.
Thank you so much, BPS. Assemblyman Watts, closing remarks.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Howard Watts for the record. Again, I thank you for your time and consideration of AB 171. A couple of things I'll just quickly say in closing. As was noted by some of the other speakers, you heard about how unique and significant this place is, and I do agree with some of the remarks made by Senator Hansen that it is not just because of the presence of a shallow water table. And while those are very interesting things to look into and study from a scientific perspective, and I support that wholeheartedly, again, we're looking at the cultural significance and taking what actions we can at a state level to protect this specific grove of trees for that reason. Just briefly, in response to some of the comments that were made in neutral, again, this proposal has evolved since the time it was first brought forward in the Public Lands Committee, initially looking at designating these trees as a fully protected species, which is a designation made by the state based on a scientific evaluation and applies to an entire species, usually that is at risk or threatened. And we ultimately decided to go in a different direction with this bill. So I just want to make that clear. And again, we have used this authority to protect certain other things, including cacti and yucca. I understand the slippery slope argument, but we bring forward many ideas into this legislative body, some of which we decide to move forward after vetting and some of which we do not. And we cannot tie the hands of any future legislature if they wish to take similar action to protect another area. But what I can say is that this policy is not more broadly targeted. We are looking at a very specific grove of trees that is very specifically geographically defined for protection. So in terms of the intent of those of us that brought this measure forward, it is not more expansive. It is focused particularly on the issues that we have discussed in this hearing today. And so with that, I ask for your support for AB 171. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Assemblyman Watts. I'll go ahead and close the hearing on AB 171, and let's continue forward with Assembly Joint Resolution 4. I'll go ahead and open a hearing on AJR 4, which urges Congress and the President of the United States to protect certain land containing swamp cedars in Spring Valley. So, welcome back, Assemblyman Watts. Long time no see. Please proceed with your presenters.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. For the record, Howard Watts, representing Assembly District 15 in Clark County. I'm glad to present Assembly Joint Resolution 4 for your consideration today. For the sake of time, what I will say is that this measure is also about protecting the swamp cedars within Basawabi. And as I have previously mentioned, these trees are essentially all located on federal lands. And so we have to balance between the roles and responsibilities that the state government has as well as the federal government. AJR 4 looks to address the federal land management responsibilities by calling for additional federal protections. as was noted, there is a traditional cultural property designated for Basawabi. There is an area of critical environmental concern for the swamp cedars that is, I believe, smaller. And then these are located in a much larger Great Basin National Heritage Area. So these are some federal designations that have been given that provide both recognition and to some degree a level of heightened protection, or at least awareness about this special place. However, we believe that those protections are not enough to guarantee that that this grove of trees will endure into future generations. And so essentially what AJR 4 does is it calls upon Congress and the President to look into additional actions that could be taken to protect specifically these lands. And again, I want to be extremely clear, this would be using federal authority to strengthen protections on federal lands, and specifically the area where this grove of trees exists. So after going through some of the cultural importance of the area, which you have already heard about in the resolution, it simply calls for the President and Congress to take additional action, and it's a bit open-ended. It proposes a couple of ideas that have been suggested by indigenous leaders, including a potential expansion of Great Basin National Park to have a separate area including the trees, or the designation as a national monument, but it is not limited to those. So any federal action that would increase protection for the area would be welcome and encouraged. With that, that concludes my presentation. I don't know if Mr. Sanford might have anything that he would like to add for context, and then I think after that we'd be ready to take any questions that the committee has.
This is Dr. Monty Sanford. Thank you, Chairman Watts and members of the Senate committee. I would like to add a few remarks if I could, and that is just regarding the levels of protections for swamp cedars. So as Howard mentioned, there is Basawabi is designated as a traditional cultural property under the National Historic or on the National Register of Historic Places. That area is a very small area of Spring Valley. There is also the area of critical environmental concern designated by the BLM. That's about 2,000 acres, and it's a very small subset of the traditional cultural property. Those designations provide little to no protection. The ACEC provides some level of protection because I think in the BLM's resource management plan, it prevents any occupancy of the site. And so if a developer or somebody wants to come in and occupy the area, they can't occupy it. It's no surface occupancy is what they call it. As far as the TCP, the National Historic Preservation Act does not disallow the destruction of TCPs or other eligible properties on the National Register. It simply provides a process to go through if those sites were to be destroyed. And then I would like to just address momentarily the Department of Natural Resource Conservation and Natural Resources concern regarding setting precedent. To my understanding that, we have in the state of Nevada Christmas trees, yuccas, and cacti that are protected under NRS 527, and that includes, to my knowledge, federal land. And in fact, there's specific language in NRS 522 regarding federal property. And so those are protected, and the state does have authority for those protections on federal land. And it's sort of similar to how the Fish and Game or the Department of Wildlife might regulate hunting and fishing. And so I just want to, make that known that it's not a totally new thing that the state could do here. And so, what we're left with the traditional cultural property for Bassa Wabi is very, very little to very none protection for the site. And that's why we'd like the Senate committee to, approve AJR 4, urging Congress to, protect this important site for indigenous communities and all of Nevadans. Thank you.
I believe with that, we can take any questions that members of the committee may have. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Assemblyman Watts. Committee members, any questions? I think we're good to go. All right, let's go ahead and go to testimony. So is there anyone in the room who would like to testify in support?
Thank you one more time, Senator Doñate and members of the committee. For the record, my name is Christy Cabrera, CHRISTI, and I'm the Policy and Advocacy Director for the Nevada Conservation League here in support of AJR 4. It's important that we preserve places with such historic and cultural significance, and this resolution is a step in the right direction to permanently protecting the swamp cedars and the special places where they grow, or special place where they go, I should say. We urge the committee's support, and thank you for your time today.
Thank you so much. Is there anyone else? BPS, seeing none, let's go ahead and to the phone lines if anyone wants to provide support testimony on AJR 4.
Thank you, Chair. To testify in support on Assembly Joint Resolution 4, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Caller with the last 3 digits, 393. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes and may begin.
Good afternoon, Chair and members of the committee. For the record, my name is Ian Bigley. That is IAN BIGLEY, Progressive Leadership Alliance of Nevada, here in support of Assembly Joint Resolution 4. This legislation recognizes that sacred places for indigenous peoples exist outside of the arbitrarily set up reservation boundaries. In this case, they exist on stolen land that has been declared federal. For many years, Nevada tribes who value this area as culturally and traditionally significant have worked to preserve the swamp cedars for future generations. It is imperative for us to do all that we can for a place that holds such significance for rightful caretakers of these areas. AJR 4 is an important step to ensure that we are doing all we can to protect peace. Thank you.
Caller with the last 3 digits, 662. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You have 2 minutes and may begin.
My name is Kyle, K-Y-L-E, last name Roerink, R-O-E-R-I-N-K. I'm the Executive Director of the Great Basin Water Network. Chairman Doñate and members of the committee, the Great Basin Water Network supports AJR 4. This resolution is simple. It is asking the congressional delegation and the executive branch of the U.S. government to preserve and acknowledge a site with so much history. The intent of this bill is about recognizing that significant sites for Native people exist outside the bounds of reservations. This is certainly a reasonable notion, especially when heard in conjunction with the stories from folks like Delane and Chairman Steele. As we heard from Dr. Sanford earlier, Bassa Wabi lacks safeguards to maintain the integrity of the area for years to come. The 14,000-acre site, which is overseen by the Bureau of Land Management, is already listed as a traditional cultural property on the National Register of Historic Places. It is also an area of critical environmental concern. However, these protections are only nominal. Some would say toothless. They do not bear the weight of something like a National Historic Landmark, National Monument, or a National Park, among others. The existing designations at Swamp Cedars do, however, recognize the well-established facts presented to you all today by Dr. Sanford and others. Now it is time for the legislature to take what it now knows about this important place and ensure this site receives the protections it needs. Please support this resolution. Thank you.
Caller with the last three digits, 445. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You have 2 minutes and may begin.
Good afternoon, Chair Donate and committee members. I am Teresa Crawford, Teresa Crawford, a volunteer member of the Sierra Club. And on behalf of the club and our more than 40,000 members and supporters statewide, we speak in support of AJR 4. As we've heard in so many compelling reasons that we need to urge greater federal protection to preserve these irreplaceable cultural, historical, spiritual, and natural resources. And the idea of cultural honor is really paramount here and a very strong reason to vote for it. And it's the first time for Nevada to recognize a sacred place for the Ely Shoshone, Deckwater Shoshone, and the Confederated Tribes of the Goshute Reservation. We're so grateful to Delane and Rick Spilsbury and Chairman Steele for sharing their stories. The Sierra Club is committed to protecting the spiritual and cultural practices of Native communities throughout the nation, and we believe that this request is a critical step to ensure lasting protection and peace for the Sacred Water Valley. For these reasons, we urge you to vote yes on AJR 4. Thank you.
Caller with the last three digits, 728. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You have 2 minutes and may begin.
Good afternoon, Chair Donate and members of the committee. For the record, this is Marla McDade-Williams with Strategies 360, speaking again on behalf of the Reno Sparks Indian Colony. For all the reasons outlined by the bill sponsor, as well as in my previous testimony, we want to go on record in support of AJR 4. Thank you.
Caller with the last three digits, 377. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You have 2 minutes and may begin.
My name is Jana Moan, Jainamoan, and I'm the External Affairs Director for the Nature Conservancy in Nevada. Chair Donate and members of the committee, we are here to testify in support of AJR 4. We recognize the importance of the Bosawabi for the Native peoples of Nevada and support additional protections for this culturally significant place. The Conservancy would like to share an additional reason for why it is important to conserve the Bosawabi within Spring Valley. As indicated in written testimony we submitted to the committee, the Nature Conservancy has recently mapped landscapes in North America that can provide habitat for species as they migrate or shift locations in response to climate change. Using this data, the Conservancy qualitatively identified several climate-resilient passages in Nevada, which are networks of connected lands and waters where nature can thrive in spite of changing conditions. One of those network of connected landscapes, which we call the Monsoon Passage, named for its location at the western edge of the Baja monsoonal storms, extends along the valleys and ranges in eastern Nevada. Spring Valley is a key node of the Monsoon Passage. We think it will provide multi-generation refuge for plants and wildlife from drought and heat and allow species to disperse across Spring Valley from Snake Range to the Shell Creek Range. Bosawabi is a unique ecosystem and a microhabitat, and there is no similar place anywhere else. There are many reasons to protect Spring Valley. We thank the tribal leaders for sharing their history and culture again, and we urge the members of this committee to vote yes on AJR 4. Thank you so much.
We are currently in support testimony on Assembly Joint Resolution 4. If you have joined the call and would like to testify in support, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Chair, there are no additional callers in support at this time.
Thank you so much, BPS. Let's go next to testimony in opposition. Is there anyone in the room? Seeing none, let's go ahead and go to opposition testimony on the phone lines.
Thank you, Chair. To testify in opposition on Assembly Joint Resolution 4, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Chair, there are no callers in opposition at this time.
Thank you so much, BPS. And last but not least, is there anyone in the room wishing to testify in neutral on AJR 4? Seeing none, let's go ahead and go to the phone lines. Is there anyone willing to testify in neutral on AGR 4?
Thank you, Chair. To testify in neutral on Assembly Joint Resolution 4, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Chair, there are no callers in neutral at this time.
Thank you so much, BPS. Assemblywoman Watts, closing remarks.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. Howard Watts for the record. I'll be very brief. I just want to thank you again for your time, attention, and consideration, and congratulate you on getting through a robust agenda in, I believe, under 2 hours. So with that, I thank you again and ask for your support on AJR 4. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Assemblywoman Watts. And I would just want to share my deep respect to Ms. Spilsbury and Mr. Steele for your presentations today. It was very warming and powerful to hear your testimony and their background about this and on both bills. And I think it's important that we continue to uplift issues and voices that have been ignored for far too long. And, you know, I sincerely appreciate Assemblyman Watts' efforts to give some spotlight to Indigenous voices. So thank you, sir. So with that, I'll go ahead and close the hearing on AGR 4. The committee will not be taking any action on that bill today, but it may bring it back for a future work session. Let's go and close this off with public comment. So at this time, I'll go ahead and call for public comment. Please remember to limit your comments to 2 minutes each. Is there anyone in the room or online wishing to provide public comment at this time? I don't see anyone in the room, so BPS, is there anyone on the lines wishing to provide public comment?
Thank you, Chair. We are currently on public comment. If you have joined the call and would like to provide public comment, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Chair, there are no callers wishing to provide public comment at this time.
Thank you so much. Members, any comments before we adjourn? Seeing none, our next meeting will be Tuesday, May 11th upon adjournment of the Senate Committee on Judiciary, and this meeting is now adjourned. Thank you.